patriotism. Our country has given us a platform for growth, and we have been part of its economic and social history. We do have a strong desire to give back in any way that we can. We take the time to tell young family members about the history of the institution, but also on its role in the country's development. And I like to think it does help instill a sense of pride and patriotism in the members. And the last principle on the business of family is the issue of family governance. I believe governance is as important there as it is in the corporate institution. This guides the family's actions as owners and stewards. By creating a family council and drawing up a family constitution, it has helped us ensure that our conduct and roles are defined, as well as succession and the financial benefits that family members draw from the business. This is an ongoing process. It's never quite finished, but I like to think that Fernando and I provided some leadership in taking it forward. We take these measures today in the hope that the next generation of leaders will run the business in a manner consistent with the family's long-held values. This brings me to my last point around how Ayala's evolution thus far has been closely intertwined with the development of the country. Our group has always felt deeply about its commitment to nation building. We strive to align our business objectives to the broader development agenda of the country. In recent years, it has become clear to us that business cannot operate in a vacuum. It is in our strategic interest as an institution to ensure the progressive development of all the markets that we serve. To remain relevant, private enterprises need to consider the welfare of society and not just its own, and this is something Fernando and I feel very strongly about. From a practical standpoint, we need only ask ourselves, how can businesses thrive amid a degraded environment and economic inequity? We must evolve to a more imaginative capitalism, where social issues are integrated into and made central, not merely adjacent, to the strategies that we follow as business institutions. At Ayala, we've embraced this philosophy and have over time made a deliberate effort to redefine our business models to address societal challenges and cater to a wider segment of Filipinos. In closing, I believe that now, more than ever, a deeper engagement with society is indispensable to the survival and success of private enterprises. It's absolutely key to building trust as institutions. From both a practical and moral standpoint, I believe businesses cannot thrive in an environment rife with economic inequity. We have seen how tensions arising from economic inequity have polarized societies around the world. Ignoring these issues threatens our ability to create long-term value and jeopardizes the sustainability of the enterprise and markets. Many companies, like we at Ayala, are already striving to align our business goals more specifically with the needs of the communities we interact with and to make meaningful, positive impact to society and our country. In many ways, we've already included, with the help of many in our team, I see TG Limcauco today, our CFO, and he's helped us lead this, but I know Jimmy's played a big role in that, in Ali as well, in beginning to integrate a sustainability report into the traditional reports we give to the SEC and make it part and parcel of our annual report rather than just the financial component. And so, in many ways, this is how we would like to define both the Ayala of today and our evolution in the years to come. But again, thank you for this opportunity, and I'd like to pass the floor to Fernando to be able to deliver his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting points. Our next keynote speaker is the brother, younger. I think he was born March 14, 1960. Is the younger brother of Jasa. He's President and Chief Operating Officer of Ayala Corporation. He's Chair of Ayala Land and Manila Water Company. He sits in the board of Habitat for Humanity, the Philippine National Museum, and Caritas Manila, and also is a member of the World Presidents Organization, married with 3 children. The reason I mention 4, we should write Facebook. When did you add the other one, huh? You're sure your wife knows? But in any event, I was in an ASEAN forum yesterday of women, and I just want a footnote there are no female in your management committee. Okay? The women here, please note. Maybe we should apply to Ismon and Musura here, Mon. You should start hiring female lawyers, okay? In any event, the reason I mention family here is it is keynote now to millennials, and we are millennials again. They don't talk about work-life balance. No, that's passé. It is now work-life blend. That is why it's important for us to know how many children you have. Ladies and gentlemen, we please welcome Mr. Fernando Sobel de Ayala.
Thank you very much, Lorna, and good afternoon again to everyone. Jaime has given you a sense of our corporate stewardship philosophy at Ayala. In my case, I'd like to elaborate on two key points that he cited earlier. The first is how our corporate stewardship philosophy has translated to our governance framework. And the second, how a deeper engagement with society has redefined our business strategy in recent years. So let me start with our governance framework and how we constantly strive to raise the bar as a way to foster long-term sustainable growth. As Jaime pointed out, a major milestone in Ayala's governance history was in the 1970s when we transitioned from a family partnership into a corporation and shortly after listed in the stock exchange. This brought in a whole new level of governance standards that pushed us to benchmark ourselves against metrics set out by the international investment to guide management as it addresses challenges and market opportunities. The current members of our board possess expertise in a wide range of disciplines, from economics to finance and business to technology. With each member possessing strong independence in thinking, we encourage a culture of trust, openness, and constructive dissent. We have a culture of healthy challenge in the boardroom and senior management. I should add, by the way, that we have many female directors. And so, but it's true. We haven't had a CEO other than Vicky Carchitorena, who headed our foundation. But we certainly have a lot of extremely competent female executives, and who knows, one of these days. In particular, with their wealth of business experience and the interest of the company at heart, we greatly rely on the guidance of our independent directors in many of our strategic decisions. We support the 9-year limit for independent directors set forth by the Securities and Exchange Commission. We believe this is an appropriate tenure for an independent director to gain deep familiarity with the business, to be able to provide valuable foresight, and still maintain impartiality. The second example I want to cite is how our approach to transparency has dramatically shifted from mere compliance to a strategic mechanism that can drive competitiveness and long-term growth and value for Ayala. We believe that transparency goes beyond regulatory requirements and should take investor needs as the foundation. This entails providing quality information on key areas such as strategy, governance, financial performance, and risks, all imperative in making sound investment decisions. At Ayala, we have started communicating in detail our long-term strategic targets to our shareholders, including our 5-year plan for 2020. We believe this level of transparency not only helps investors understand our long-term thinking, it also effectively imposes greater accountability on ourselves to execute on these aspirations. In addition, we constantly look for ways to elevate our level of disclosure to cater to investors' increasing focus on environmental, social, and governance, or ESG. This year, we published Ayala's first annual report under the Integrated Report Framework, which captures in great detail our ESG performance along with financial and operational results. We're proud to say that Ayala was the first company in the Philippines to adopt this globally acknowledged annual reporting standard. Finally, we view disclosure as more than just published documents. It extends to interactions with capital market participants such as equities, analysts, and investors. We have a robust investor relations program that focuses on access to Ayala's senior management through roadshows, analyst briefings, company visits, in which they provide updates on corporate objectives, including long-term goals and financial targets. Overall, by running our businesses professionally and with high standards of governance, we believe we have advanced the brand equity of our institution. Over the years, these high standards of governance have helped us attract the best and most respected partners with global institutions such as Mitsubishi, Singapore Telecom, JP Morgan, DBS, and GIC, to name a few. Furthermore, Ayala has gained interest from a good number of blue-chip institutional investors from around the world who have become long-term shareholders of our companies. The second point I want to highlight is how a deeper engagement with society bolstered a shift in the way we view value creation. As Jaime alluded to, it is indispensable that we continue to build trust and relevance by being a contributor to society as a whole. Many business groups, like ourselves at Ayala, have sought to embrace this philosophy and align profit goals more specifically with the needs of the communities that we interact with. There are growing examples across the Ayala Group, but let me just cite a few, starting with our water business. Manila Water delivers water supply as well as sewerage and sanitation services to more than 6 million customers in the eastern part of Metro Manila. It has a flagship program called Tubig para sa Barangay, which is designed specifically for areas with clusters of low-income communities, including informal settlers. Tubig para sa Barangay is a business model targeting the base of the pyramid that some people had said would not work because the informal communities would not pay for piped-in water. However, Manila Water has succeeded in getting more than 1.6 million people into the program with 100% collection efficiency in these communities. Manila Water developed a new business model that included flexible financing options and a socialized tariff scheme. These low-income participants in the program now enjoy savings on their water costs, the waterborne diseases in their areas have been reduced, and the overall sanitation conditions in their communities has greatly improved. More recently, we also pursued sectors with significant gaps in capacity, accessibility, quality, and affordability that are critical to broad-based development. Through power and infrastructure, we are helping expand the country's infrastructure systems, a vital engine for broad-based development. Through healthcare and education, we're expanding our reach to the low-income segment with affordable products and services that are specifically designed to meet their real needs, preferences, and motivations. Through industrial technologies, we aim to revitalize the manufacturing industry and create jobs for a wider segment of Filipinos. These businesses are in various stages of maturity, but we're excited about their trajectory and the impact they can create to improve lives. As opposed to altruism, we view this philosophy as imperative in sustaining the long-term growth and relevance of our institution. Business cannot thrive in failing economies rife with inequality. These elements are just a few examples of the way that we practice corporate stewardship. We have always been aware that Ayala as a business would not have succeeded through the years without the trust that Filipinos have put in us. By ensuring an internal system of checks and balances, by deepening our relationships with all our stakeholders, and by keeping the interests of the country in mind, we believe Ayala can continue to create and share value in the years to come. Thank you all very much, and I look forward to a productive discussion after this.
Thank you very much. Let us again give our two keynote speakers a very big round of applause. You know, if you were taking notes, and I'm sure we all were, the 5 or the 6 key values which our 2 keynote speakers talked about is exactly what we need for Philippines, Inc. Stewardship versus ownership, a strong work ethic, stability and unity, a strong sense of patriotism, family governance, well-governance, and to align our business with national objectives. Do you want to run for senators of this republic? Or run this country? Or president? No. Philippines, Inc. We shall now move on to the second part of our afternoon, and this will be moderated by Kathy. We all know Catherine. Kathy Yipiang is a Filipina, multi-awarded journalist who has worked in various news outfits across the Asia-Pacific region over a span of 15 years. She has a master's in journalism at the Oak Ford University, after which she joined Bloomberg TV based in Tokyo, then moved to Hong Kong and finally returned to the Philippines in August 2015 to rejoin ABS-CBN as an anchor for the news channel. You all see her. She hosts Market Edge with Cathy Young, Business Nightly, and The Boss. Cathy will be moderating in a few minutes, but before she does that, let me introduce to you our first panelist. I am told that each panelist should deliver or shall deliver a 5-minute opening statement. And it even says here in the script, let me repeat, 5 minutes only. Don't blame me, I'm just reading the script. After the 5-minute opening statements, our panelists and our moderator will take over. Ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to our first panelist, Mr. Francis Estrada. Francis served or has served as independent director and board and committee chair in a number of leading publicly listed companies like Ayala Land Inc., Philam Life, Energy Development Corporation, RCBC, RCB Savings Bank, Engineering Equipment Inc., etc. He serves or has served on the boards of a number of private companies in both the profit and not-for-profit sector. Please welcome Mr. Francis.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just a couple of words. We will be very truthful and compliant with the 5-minute guideline. When Evelyn first wrote and invited me to serve on the panel, I said, this is a very unusual situation. The brothers, I've never heard of the brothers speaking on the same panel, number one. But more importantly, when we're talking of principled corporate stewardship, the issue is within the Asian region, and not just in the Philippines, the bulk of the major, even publicly listed companies, with the possible exception of Japan and maybe China, are primarily controlled by family enterprises. Therefore, it is particularly relevant that we basically ask Jaime and Fernando their experience here. Now we move to the Philippines. There are very few organizations that can speak of 7 generations in control. To the best of my knowledge, you have probably 2 of those organizations, and one of them, the larger, is the Ayala Group. I also remember many years ago, I think, our distinguished guest, Wash Sisip, had been invited to speak, I think it was to the Chinese Chamber of Commerce. And it happened, this was several years ago, and it was a time where there was a major transformation in the power of the private sector. In other words, from the traditional Spanish, Filipino, American, etc., you now had the Chinoy business groups that had taken over. And as I recall, Wash was asked to be the speaker in that particular conference. And he did begin by congratulating everybody for the incredible performance that they had made, for the incredible work that they had made. But then he had a word of caution, asking them and the principals of those family-owned, mostly family-owned corporations, how many of you can speak in the same manner of this intergenerational continuity? I think that was a very powerful statement. And I'm very excited to see and basically ask a few questions of Jaime and Fernando. One of which I think I told Kathy from a human level before going into the more esoteric. Many people, and I've had the privilege of seeing them both operate not in a family context, but in a business context. Now, many people look at the two of you not with with both envy and admiration and say, how is it possible that brothers so seamless, they seem to operate so seamlessly? So my first question is, which I hope you will address, is this serendipity or is this a realistic target for other family corporations? With that, ladies and gentlemen, we will abide. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis. Actually, we could have given you 10 minutes. But... Our next panelist is Jose Maria K. Lim. He is the President and CEO of Metro Pacific Investment Corporation. He is a founding member of our organization, the Shareholders Association of the Philippines, Inc., and is an active member in various business organizations, awarded by the Corporate Governance Asia as the best CEO for Investors Relations for 5 consecutive years, from 2012 to 2016. He finished his undergraduate and master's at the best school in Katipunan, the Ateneo de Manila University. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Joey.
Good afternoon, and thank you, SharePHIL, for giving me this opportunity to join you today. When I was taking notes on Jaime's and Fernando's presentations, I could relate to almost everything they were saying because of the similar situations we find ourselves in. Of course, they're a lot more diversified than we are. We are basically infrastructure centric, whereas they have a lot of other unregulated businesses. But what struck me in their messages were that a company as large as Ayala has to think about the welfare, their commitment to the society that they operate in, and all the stakeholders who are involved in whatever activities they do. I would like to focus on that because I find that very relevant in the case of Metro Pacific, where we believe in similar fashion that if you cannot deliver service or public goods to the community in an efficient manner, you have no business being in that, and it's not sustainable. So we too are thinking about ESG and how that relates to infrastructure. So I find that this can be a very long and interesting conversation because the challenges are quite large. And I would like to take that up when we have the panel discussion. So thank you very much.
taken me so seriously. That was only 3 minutes. But for the panel discussion and open forum, may I now ask our moderator, Ms. Kathy, and our panelists, Francis and Joey, to please take their seats on stage, please. And may I also ask, please, our 2 keynote speakers to take their seats on stage for the panel discussion. I am told that there are microphones on the floor for your use in directing questions to our panelists and speakers. Please be brief in asking your questions, and please refrain from making a speech. Again, I'm just reading. So, Ms. Kathy, I think you're starting with questions and then you will ask. So please, this is participative, especially the young ones have joined us from the schools. Make this a learning experience, and for us older ones, let us make this a real learning experience. I just want to share with you a very brief anecdote. There was, in points of view, there was this young boy who asked the priest, "Father, can I smoke while praying?" And the priest said, "No, my son, you cannot smoke while praying." So the young boy said, "But Father, can I pray while smoking?" And the priest said, "Of course, my son, you can pray while smoking." So sometimes it's just points of view. You listen to our panelists and moderators for their points of view.
Thank you, Lorna. Much appreciated. And lovely to be here. It's a change of pace in my own schedule. As you know, I'm on air almost every hour, but not really. I am missing the afternoon schedule for this. It's a lovely moment to be with you, gentlemen. Thank you so much. An opportunity to deepen also my learning about corporate governance, which I cover. I cover finance news, and every now and then I encounter it, but peripherally. But now it's really dead center, and I want to learn from everybody today. So I want everybody to come to the microphone, or maybe holler out. If you're too shy, write it down on a piece of paper and pass it on to me. But I get the ball rolling by asking Mr. Francis's question, because you've been dying to ask the brothers. The seamlessness of your leadership at Ayala, it seems like you kind of read each other's minds. I mean, deconstruct for us what's a day like between you two, and how you actually are planning for the next generation. Is it replication or an intention to teach and for them to execute in a way that would be good for the family company? Okay, you guys couldn't figure out who speaks first, but I guess the older one gets the first answer.
First and foremost, I think teamwork in our environment is important, but it's also a huge advantage to be two. I'm sure in some cases it can be a problem, but we see it as a huge advantage. Number one, we're a very personalized society in the Philippines. A lot of time is demanded of all of us, I'm sure Joe and Francis as well, both on a personal front and an institutional front. And being two really helps. I mean, we can divide up the work and pass the baton on to each other in many ways. On a daily basis, our offices are right across from each other, so a lot of our conversations take place while on the run or talking to our secretaries. It's not necessarily in a formal setting. But I think the key is the fact that both Fernando and I had the good fortune. We grew up together. We went pretty much to the same schools throughout our lives. So we shared the same friends and the same experiences in many ways. But very quickly on, when we both were given the responsibility for taking leadership at Ayala, I think it just took, if I recall, maybe just one lunch or one meeting where we divided up our responsibilities. And I think pretty much we stayed on to that agreement as we moved on. And as new responsibilities came or new investments, it just took maybe a 5-minute discussion to say, look, I'll take leadership here or I'll take leadership there. And when one of us is not around, then usually, in most cases, we're represented on the board as a vice chair, and we just take the reins for that moment. So I think it was really a trust that was built up over the years, and a quick decision-making on where we take leadership and responsibility, and it's just worked out nicely.
I'm really curious, so what did Dad have to say when that meeting came up over lunch? Like, do this, do that? I mean, did he take part? Did he have a part at
sorry?
actually deciding on who manages what? Your dad? Yeah.
No, by that time he had already passed things on to us, and so we just discussed. Really, we're in the holding company, but we share a responsibility in working with the different parts of the Ayala Group. I did want to mention, though, how important it is to really give clear messages when you're at the helm of the corporation. We have extremely competent executives. We're very fortunate to work with some of the best minds in the country. It would be terrible if, as brothers, we delivered different types of messages within the organization. We're lucky that, as Jaime said, we grew up together and have just been very, very close as friends all our lives. I think it's important to have that stability in corporations. We see too many cases, unfortunately, of family-dominated businesses where something goes wrong in the dynamic of the family members, and professional managers cannot operate in that kind of an environment when there are divided loyalties and all of that. So we try and make sure, and we do naturally think alike. And so in that sense, I like to think that we deliver consistent messages throughout the organization.
You mentioned a phrase, if I could, constructive dissent. That kind of caught my attention. What is constructive dissent between you? I mean, have you ever had a fight that nearly, got you thinking about whether you could manage a company forward, Jaime?
Yeah. Well, I like to think that, as I said, we went to school, pretty much the same schools throughout most of our lives. And in that process, at least the education that we both had, giving one's opinion was a perfectly natural process. And we've had a chance to discuss many things in life, both at the intellectual level and later on at the professional level. I like to think Fernando has tremendous strengths in some areas that I know very little about, and hopefully I have in other areas. If one has an open mind and learns to listen and absorb, it's just amazing, how your decision-making process becomes so much better. One thing I've mentioned to Fernando on many an occasion when we both have a moment together to discuss a problem is how sometimes a very strong opposing opinion is not necessarily something we see as a detriment. It actually makes you think a lot harder about the decision you have to finally make. If you don't get that, then if nothing pushes you, we all have cognitive biases, certain ways of looking at things that are not necessarily right all the time. I do believe in instinct to a certain extent, but I also believe in long-term processing of thoughts, particularly complex ones. If you don't get an opposing point of view, you won't think about it from that point of view. And I think a lot of people, when they're discussing, fail to listen. They're just quite keen on just giving their opinion. But if you sit and absorb and listen to a different point of view, even if you come up with the opposite, it really makes you think deeply about whether you're really right or not. And I like to think the atmosphere we have in our group at the corporate level, both formally and informally, is one where people can just say what they think. And I like to think that that's made us a better institution. Sometimes you've got to use humor. It's not always good to be completely serious when giving an opposing point of view. You can give it in a humorous way, and sometimes it's much more effective that way. If it's always serious, then sometimes things can get a little bit heavy. But I like to think that most of our group have a very strong sense of humor. It comes out a lot when one have a drink at the end of the day. We have a little bar in Ayala to allow us to unwind also, and a lot of the banter leads to great thinking and great dialogue on many issues. But Fernando and I have not always seen things the same, and I think that's natural. But as I pointed out, we've divided up our leadership into two institutions, across different institutions, where Fernando takes the lead. He basically makes the call. In many cases, I do. But areas which have not happened very often, where we have a strong feeling, negative feeling about something, I can't remember a single moment in our 30-something years working together where we've overridden the other one. So when there's a strong feeling, I think both of us have backed off. There's so many other things that we need to be able to do.
Francis, you're nodding your head to what? Do you think this is something realistic that other family companies could follow, or is it going to be a tough call?
Well, this is precisely, I think, the point I was going to make. Predictably, the response has been rational and logical and in every possible sense. But with respect, the question really is because learning from your own experience and looking at other family enterprises, the question I have really says, invariably one of the big enemies is ego, in the sense that at a certain point, particularly for very capable people, there are authentic differences in opinion. Now, you've indicated that what you've done is you've divided the domain, as it were, and where one is dominant, one is in charge, he will make the final call and vice versa. But certainly there must be issues that have to do with the group as a whole. Now, that's a little difficult. So my question to you is this simply special? Because there are many other families that went to the same education, et cetera, but they don't quite have the same thing. Is this something that is a realistic objective? Is it something that family-controlled enterprises can aspire to realistically all the time? Or should there be a different mousetrap, as it were?
I'd say, Francis, that the one thing, I mean, I can talk either about family values that we had. You don't last this long as an organization unless you're united as a family. So it comes from childhood, fairness, respect, valuing each other. And our workplace is one of great respect among very, very talented individuals. And so there really is no room for major egos there. And actually the system, the company, we cannot thrive in that type of an environment. It's not that type of an organization. And so it's a very collegial environment that we have. I must say that we've worked with many generations of managers. When we took over from my father, many of his executives were still there. But then we started to bring in some of the executives that were more of our generation. And it's really been one of great respect as a team. It's a very open environment. Everyone feels that they can say things. They say things respectfully, but when they want to push back, they push back. And I think the great strength that we have as an organization when you're running so many institutions is precisely that. You really want to bring out the best in the individuals that are in the organization and have a level of harmony among them so that we all work together.
Well, it's so much more companies now that you manage, and I come back to what Joey said about thinking of the welfare of others. I mean, that's a kind of a pivot I think I've seen Ayala Corporation grow from one that's just focused on property and now focused on businesses that benefit the poor, or it's more inclusive when you talk health, education. Could you take us through the change that went through the family when it decided to want to be more engaged with the society that you did not intend to serve at the onset, and now are hoping to for more inclusive growth? Jaime.
I think it's, I think maybe one legacy that Fernando and I have often discussed about wanting to leave behind is an issue of relevance, a company that we move on from a stewardship point of view and leave in future hands that is relevant to the future of the nation. And we realized some years back that to be relevant, we had to touch a broader community of customers, consumers, and the public than we have touched in the past. Traditionally, we were a company that just basically had a high-end product in a number of our businesses, but you know, we were profitable, but perhaps we were not as relevant as we wanted to be. And part of the agenda of growth, of engagement, really meant that we had to be more relevant to a broader community of Filipinos. And that dovetailed with a lot of thinking that took place about 20 years ago.